Hello, welcome everyone. Today we are solving the contains duplicate problem. For that we will be given an integer array called nums, and we will have to return true if any value appears at least twice in the array, and we will have to return false if every element is distinct. So for example, we know if we pay attention to the example 1, we can see that 1 is repeated twice. If we now go to example number 2, we can see that there is no element repeated, so the output will be false. And if now we go to the example number 3, we can see that 1 and 3 and 2 and 4 are repeated, so it contains duplicates. How can we solve this problem? So imagine that we focus on the first element here, and that this is our input array. One idea that we can come up with is to create another array called visited, which at the beginning will be empty, and we will store all the elements that we have already visited. So for example, if we go to the first element of the input array, which is a 1, we can ask, is 1 part of the visited array? It's not, so then we add it. Now we go to the second element of the array, and we see that it's a 2. Is 2 inside visited? It's not, so we add it again. Now we check, is 3 inside visited? No. And is 1 inside visited? Yes, it is. So now, because you can see we have already visited 1, our algorithm should return true because it contains a duplicate. And what if, for example, we try to solve this other problem? At the beginning, our visited array will be empty. Now, if we visit the first element of the input array, which is a 1, as the visited array is empty, 1 is not part of it, so we add it. Now we go to 2. 2 has not been visited yet, so we add it again. And 3 has not been visited either, so we add it. And now, as we have finished, as there are not more elements inside the input array to be visited, we have visited them all, and we haven't run into any duplicate, we will return false because there are no duplicates. But what would happen if we try to solve this problem this way? That, well, we will not be able to solve it because we will exceed the time limit constraint. So why does this happen? Why do we exceed the time limit? Because every time we visit an element of the input array, we have to iterate through the visited array to check whether that element already exists inside the visited array or that it doesn't, so we have to add it to the visited array. So that means that we are running 2 different for loops, which is a big N of n squared, where n is the size of the input array. So a different way to solve the problem is by using a hash map instead of an array. Why is that? Because, well, imagine that we are using a hash map instead of an array, and that we visit the first element of the input array, which is 1. At the beginning, the hash map is empty, so 1 doesn't exist, and as it doesn't exist, we add it to the hash map. Okay, what happens with 2? Is 2 part of the visited hash map? No, it is not, and the same thing happens with 3. But what happens when we go and visit the second 1 element? So now if we try to do visited of 1, it will return true because, well, as we can see, 1 is part of the visited hash map. But the difference between solving this problem by using a hash map or an array is that, as we have already seen, using an array, we have to iterate through the input array, and we have to also iterate through the visited array, which is a big O of n squared. Whereas when we use a hash map, instead we have to iterate through the input array, but we do not have to iterate through the visited hash map, because, well, the time complexity to check whether a value exists or not in a hash map is constant. So now, if we solve the problem by using a hash map instead of an array, we would drop the time complexity to n instead of to n squared. Here we've got the solution using a hash map instead of an array. In the first line of code, what we do is that we initialize an empty Python dictionary that we will use as a hash map. Next, we have to iterate through every single element inside the numbers array, and we have to check whether the current number that we are visiting has been already visited or not. If it has, we return true, because it means that that number is duplicated in the array. But, well, if it has not been visited, then we add it to the visited hash map. What happens if we visit all the elements inside the numbers array, but there isn't anyone duplicated? Then we return false, and that's it. Simple as that. If we submit it again, you can see it had already passed all the tests. Oh well, again,